Yes, but we don't have much time, and I want to get through all of my material.
Do you have any kind of solution for the holes in the bottom of the bucket? I mean, I know the limits.
Yes.
The limits, but what about the person, who keeps having, they still have holes?
Yeah. All right, well, I'll give you kind of the short answer to that is, actually someone asked me a question about that earlier during the break, and they were like, here's this dependent person, and they're always wanting to text you, or always wanting to talk with you, and they're always wanting to whatever. One of the things I want you to do is, what they need is limits. In other words, what they need is to have some limits placed on their access to you. Their dependency is going to say, I want access to you all the time. I want you to be a version of sanctified selfish. In other words, I want you to put your finger on your pulse and go, am I happy when I get a text from this person? Do I want to be this available to them? And start listening to yourself and thinking, what would feel better for me? Do I need some space? Do I need to only be available to them at some times? And listen to that and ask yourself, if that's really what I want, why am I not doing that? What would it look like to set some limits on this person? What would I feel? They'd be so disappointed. I thought you were really for me. And they'll shame you and they'll make you feel bad. And if you can withstand that, then they will be facing limits, and that fills up the holes. All right. Also, I would look for ways to empower them, in the sense of they come to you and they go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad it's finally time for us to meet again, because there's so many things I've just had to be talking to you about. I mean, it's like I've just felt like I was going to die until I got here to talk to you. And I would, instead of going, oh well, I'm here, which is all of us rescuer types desire, I would say, did you do anything yourself to manage any of those feelings until you got to me? In other words, I would kind of steer the energy back to them. What do you think it would be like to make sense of some of this? Like, I love you, I'm with you, I'm walking through you, but to the degree that you think I am so wonderful and so gifted and you're everything, that mojo comes from somewhere, and it's coming from your own heart. The greater you think I am, the less you start to feel inside. And I don't really want to keep accepting how wonderful and necessary I am, because at some level that's diminishing you. It says at some tacit level that you're really weak, and I don't believe that you are. So I'm kind of wondering, you just told me this big pain you're in. What do you think you ought to do about it? And they'll say, oh, don't do that counselor thing to me, just tell me what you think. And I go, I would love to, and I will tell you what I think, but let's do this kind of together. You have a brain, I have a brain. In other words, I'm looking for ways to kind of be pushing them out of the nest a little bit. I'm not receiving their dependency. I'm setting limits on my availability. Those kind of limits create the holes in the bottom of the boat, because what they have to start doing is thinking. A dependent person is very impulsive. I have a need, you're there. Feel it. And as we are faced with limits, we build sense of self. As we're faced with limitations, we build ego strength. As we're faced with limitations, we sanctify. As we face trials, it develops fruits of the Spirit. It's all the same story. Okay? So what you do is create a trial. I'm not available right now, but if you'd like to leave a message, All right, so thank you for your question. All right, so safety, part of that is confidentiality, part of that is being somebody who's not judging and who's not a fixer. Those are kind of obvious things. To the degree that you can't, as Trey said, react with horror when they bring their pain to you. Or fixing is a big one, because fixing comes out of our own need and our own fear. Someone says, I'm so depressed. What am I going to do about it? You've got to help me. Now, what do you feel right now? Wanted? You're wanted.
It's all on me.
Right, there's an anxiety. I got to fix it. I'm in ministry. And besides, if they leave John Cox's office and they say, well, he didn't help me, what's that going to do to my practice? You feel the anxiety, there's this tension. We want to fix because we care about our own fears. If I'm strong enough, I'm going to be able to say, wow, your depression is feeling really urgent. Like, you're not just depressed, you're overwhelmed by it. Like, you got to get out of it now. Next question I would ask is, what do you tend to do with feelings that feel ultimately overwhelming to you? In other words, I'm kind of asking, are you always this urgent? Which leads us to the next step in our work, and that is, we're going to call connection. And the basic premise of this is that the way people heal, there's no magic to counseling, there's no magic to therapy. The way people heal is by parts of us, emotions in us, pain in us, aspects of our character getting connected in relationship. God made up this rule. And like I said, I don't know why he did, but it's not good for the man to be alone. It's not even good for God to be alone. You know? He lives in the Trinity. People's hearts are like plants. What would happen to a plant if you put it in a box and put it in a closet, closed it up all by itself? It would wither and die. It's not getting good things from outside. And people's lives are like that. And usually the parts of them that are creating bad fruit, that are creating the problems, at some level are parts that are not connected. Now, the reason we do one-on-one, and the reason we invite these people to confide in us, and the reason we get them to open up, and the reason we probe and ask questions is because we're looking for those parts that aren't connected. Somebody was asking me earlier about porn addiction and about setting limits, and what if they don't follow the limits, and what if they blow it off, and what if they keep, regressing back and all that. And I said, well, then you're really getting to the fun stuff. Because when someone comes in to see me with an addiction, the first thing they always say is, oh, Doc, you got to help me. I got to quit drinking. And I was like, yeah, sure you do. So let's work and help understand why you drink, and let's set limits and blah, 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 or why you do porn, and let's set limits and blah, blah. And before you know it, they keep relapsing and they're having trouble. And then we get to the meat of the matter. Then we start listening to finding the part of them that really is secret. And that's when they finally can come in and go, you know what, I don't want to give this up. I love this. And I'm like, thank you. Now I know your heart. Now we know the enemy. Now we're not BSing along about how much you want to stop. That's just part of you. There's another part of you that's in secret that loves this. Let's get to know that part of you. That part of you needs to encounter me. That part of you needs to encounter God. And God made us when we're connected that those parts start to metabolize and get better. That's what confession is, by the way. Confession is not just to, for me to get right with God. Confession is also literally telling the truth, bringing that which is in the darkness into the light. And that's where it can get better, okay? Now, why does that work? Number one, as my kids text, IDK. As Paul would say, it is a mystery. I do not know why connection to relationship makes parts of us get better. I don't know it at all. I do know some things, though. And one of the reasons it works is because anything that I've not talked about out loud, anything I've not put words on and articulated to another person is an amorphous mess. It's a blob. It's undefined, and therefore it has power. Okay? Think about it like you have a big financial mess. You're hemorrhaging money. You're in debt. You've got bills due. And it just feels like this looming, nasty mess. But you go to a financial advisor and you start laying it out. And you say, oh, well, this credit card's doing this kind of a interest rate. No wonder you're here. Well, look, we can move some of this money to here. Actually, what you need to do is to minimize some of this. Well, what if instead of doing this with your paycheck, we did that? And all of a sudden you start to see it, and it's something you can back up and look at with someone else's eyes, and it becomes something you have more of a handle on. Tons and tons of people's emotions that are never articulated feel like that mess, feel like that blob. You'll say, what is that bad feeling that you keep feeling? They go, I don't know. It just feels terrible. And I know I'm onto something. I'm onto something that they've never put words on. And once you can put words on it, you can start to get a handle on it. Teenagers are big about this. They will tend to act on their emotion and not really talk about their emotion. But if you can get them to talk about it, it starts to create these hooks to hang their hat on. Having someone external see something creates a perspective. I used to have this funny experience always when I would go get a cavity filled, and they numb your mouth. And you know how it feels like your lips real big and puffy, after you get your mouth numbed? I always had the funny experience. I would get in the car after getting a cavity, and I don't know why I would do this, but I would instinctively always look in the mirror to see if my lip was really that big. And I was always a little surprised that it looked like my normal lip, because it felt like a big rubbery, lip. And it was like, but I saw in the mirror it wasn't. That's what counseling does in a sense. It says, I feel like I'm going to despair and fall apart, but as I talk to you about it, I get this mirror back that you're not freaked out about it. You can understand it. You actually put words on it. I'm saying I'm really afraid, and you say, what are you afraid of? And I say, well, I'm afraid everybody at work is going to think I'm lazy. And the therapist says back, well, it sounds like you're not so much afraid as you're feeling ashamed, or afraid of shame. And they go, yeah, exactly. Right? Now what I've done is I've taken a blob, a mess. They go to work feeling bad, but now they know, oh, that's shame. I'm afraid of shame. And one of the things that connection like that does is it starts to put hooks and understanding on emotions that are otherwise just blobs. Just that is life-giving to people. And we're at first grade here.
Feel free to address this later, but relating to connecting with the mess, I'll put this question in an example. I had a student whose mom was crazy, right? She was crazy, and she was codependent on him, all sorts of things. It was messing him up. And he couldn't put words on it or state, as a young teenager, my mom's crazy. Now he's in college, he can see my mom was crazy. He
right.
At that point. But it's still, the pain of that was still hurting him and acting
right.
now. I could see it, but one of the things I think, as I feel as a youth minister, this may be the way I need to be or may not, is I have to be careful to shore up a teenager's relationship with his parents rather than be seen as criticizing the parents or causing rebellion. So in that sort of situation where she's crazy, he can't see it, I can see it, but it's bearing fruit, I mean, how do you navigate those waters? Feel free to address that later.
Well, the short answer is stay with the teenager's subjective experience. It's like, so you had an interaction with your mom last night. It sounded like that interaction felt bad to you. Well, yeah. Well, you want to talk about it? And you can ultimately go down to like, well, it sounds like ultimately you were trying to communicate something to your mom and you felt like she really distorted you. Huh. What was that like? Do you feel like I'm hearing you? Yeah. What's that like? All right, so I'm glad there's at least one place in your world where someone can hear you when you talk to them. I'm hearing you. And I'm not getting off on whether mom's crazy or not. I'm just hearing him. That's what your mom can't do because she's crazy. Okay? So remember, you are your instrument. And relationship is what changes people. So one of the things I want to do is to not say, wow, what do I do about him and his mom? I want to say God has given him in the body of Christ a second family of which I am a part. Now, he doesn't feel like she hears him. She goes crazy and gets all up into her own thing and he gets missed. So can I hear him and not miss him? And then I want to point that out. What's this like? Again, because that thing, once we get the thing we're longing for, we often don't know what to do with it. What's it like for someone to hear you? Well, it's kind of weird. Well, okay, well, you can talk to me anytime. What do you want to do about the issues with your mom? Well, I don't know. Sometimes I just want to yell at her. Well, what would you want to yell? Well, I want to yell that you need to quit. You can't control me. You can't control my life. And I go, okay, so a lot of the issue with your mom is you feel like she controls you. Well, let's think of a way you could approach her in an adult way that says, that doesn't feel good, Mom, rather than yelling at her. And you can help shore up the relationship, but you're still setting limits in a life-giving way. You're now doing indirect therapy on Mom because you're getting the child to learn to approach her in a loving way. One of the things I want to do with adolescents is teach them, they're still in a child grid too. And their parents say, like, no, young man, you can't go out with those friends tonight. Those are hellions, and they'll go, oh my gosh. And I want to teach a teenager, I'm like, you don't feel like that's fair? We'll say, I don't feel like that's really fair. Would you let me tell you some of the reasons that I do want to go out? In other words, you say your parents treat you like a child, but when they do, you act like a child. So what about talking to them like a fellow adult? And teach them in a respectful way to engage their parents. Now that starts to do reverse family therapy back to the parents because this child is actually thinking and processing. Anyway, so you can do a lot of work even with the mom if you get the child to learn to think responsibly. Not about just, oh my gosh, Mom, but given anything that Mom says, how can I respond in a powerful, life-giving way? Now that's a good lesson for marriage. Despite the fact that I came in, my wife started screaming at me, the question is not, oh my gosh, she's screaming at me. The question is, the next person who speaks holds all the power in the relationship. How am I going to respond to that? I want to teach a teenager that if they have a crazy mom. And then they stop thinking about crazy mom, they start thinking about my own sense of me and what kind of choices do I make in life and how do I engage things. So, yeah. Okay, another reason that connection is important is that issue that if you are in relationship, if I feel pain with you, it somehow makes it manageable. And I don't know exactly why that is. Think about grieving a death. You've had a loved one die and friends come over. You really don't want to hear Romans 8:28 at this point. What you want is somebody who comes and sits down and plops on the floor and maybe fixes you both a cup of tea and you just sit there and they're quiet. The ministry of presence. As Job said, "Oh, that your wisdom would be silence." And that is, if you just sit with me in pain, something about being connected with another person in pain makes it manageable, like we were saying earlier. I'm skipping through some things, but I'm just kind of wanting to hit the high points since we're late. We stop at 11, isn't that right? Shoot. All right, that's a lot of connection, that's a lot of empathy, that's a lot of hearing. Let's talk about truth, because remember, we're talking about love and limits. All growth is grace and truth administered over time. And so what we're doing all the time, you hear me talking to Trey, and I kept talking grace and truth with this kid. I was saying, yeah, man, I totally get it. That really does feel really unfair. Well, look, how could you respond to your mom? And the dance of grace and truth is constantly there. You can't lead with truth, though we need truth. We counselors and people in ministry can't be just touchy-feely acceptance machines. Our God is propositional. He brings us truth all the time. And if people don't see new truth about their lives, they won't grow. But if they hear truth outside the context of grace, it's almost always experienced as judgment. And so they can't take it in. So you sort of have to have the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. All of this connection and acceptance and non-fixing and non-judging creates a context in which we can start pursuing more truth with them. But there are two kinds of truth. Let's see, I'm going to go over here. Internal truth and external truth. Internal truth is some of the stuff we were just talking about. Can I help somebody have a clear understanding of what their heart is like? Can I help them understand their problem better? Kid says, my parents are such jerks. What does jerks mean? What's it like for you when you do that? What do you tend to do when they're jerks? One of the reasons we ask questions is because we're holding up a psychological mirror helping someone see their internal world. Somebody says, I don't feel like anybody at school likes me. Now, you just saw them at the pizza party the other day and they were having a great time. And you want to lead with truth. What do you mean? You were having a great time with so-and-so today. What do you mean nobody likes you? But instead, if we go for internal truth, I'm going to go, whoa, like, what goes on like about that for you? What's it like? You feel like nobody likes you. I want to get them to start looking inside and going, yeah, what do I mean by that? Somebody comes in, they're devastated by a breakup. I just can't live without him. Well, what's it like? What did it mean to you? Is this breakup painful because you feel all alone? Is this breakup painful because you don't know who you are if you're not with boyfriend? Is this breakup painful because you feel rejected, like you must not be good enough if they broke up with you? Get them to start thinking. Get them to start asking. That's some of internal truth. The reason we ask questions, the reason we do empathy, and the reason therapists say, it sounds like you're really feeling so-and-so, it's not because we're wanting to have a little kumbaya time with them, okay? It's because I'm a psychological mirror, and I want to say back to you what I'm hearing you say because I want you to get it. I want you to understand you. Only if you understand you will you start to have some mastery over how you're working. All All right, external truth, and then I'm hurdling through these because I want to have more time for y'all to have questions and for us to talk more about some specifics. External truth, how do you tell the truth to people? How do you be a prophet? Number one, do it as a fellow struggler. In other words, I want to say, look, back to our pornography example. You struggle with pornography, but you know what? Every person in the world has one thing in their life that they cannot control. For some people, it's really subtle and secret, but there's something in everyone's life they cannot control. One of the reasons you don't experience me as judgmental when we're talking about your work or your own issues is because I've got my own issues in my life I can't control. And so I totally get it. Now, these choices you're making are going to ultimately really hurt you. They're going to ultimately harm you. And I need to tell you that. But I tell you that as somebody who, shoot, man, I make choices myself that are harmful. But let's walk into this together. So that context of the truth begins with that fellow struggler piece. I like external truth to be practical rather than moral. Instead of saying that's wrong, I want to say, I don't think that that's going to give you what you're wanting. Or I'm going to say, I think that that's really hurtful. Or I think that's ultimately going to really kind of be poisonous to you. Like I said yesterday, the Bible doesn't talk a lot about good boy, bad boy. It talks more about if you go this way, you will die. And so I want to be sort of more practical in the way I bring the truth. So they're sassing their parents. Instead of saying, well, you know, sassing your parents is wrong. You need to be more respectful. I want to say, you know, it's really hard to talk to anyone in a respectful way who doesn't treat you respectfully. I know that. But I think that if you and I can talk some about how to respond to your parents in some respectful ways, we can get some traction to really help things in your family be better. Now, I've told them the same truth as you need to respect your parents. I just told it to them in a practical way rather than a way that feels shameful. Again, shame is the enemy of growth. If anybody smells shame, they're gone. You lost them. So I want to bring truth in a way that's not shaming. I want to bring biblical truth in principle form. Teenagers will, especially teenagers brought up in the church, will sort of have a high alert light go off if you start pulling out Bible verses. Instead of saying, well, we need to forgive people when they hurt us. You know, the Bible says that. I want to say this. You know, one of the things that happens when we forgive people is we get free. One of the things that happens when we forgive people is we get free. To the degree that I live my life holding a grudge against this person, you know what? They own me. The Bible says that. But think about it. This person hurt me. I'm going to walk down the hall of church a different way so I don't have to see them. I'm not even going to that party because they're going to that party. That person owns a part of my soul, the part they hurt. They own me. Forgiveness means letting that go. Let's talk about forgiveness some. And now you brought a biblical principle, but in a way that this person's like, yeah. Okay? So learn to bring truth in that kind of a relational sort of way. All right, and lastly, what we're going to be looking at, which we already have addressed, is as you're thinking about them, looking for these capacities and where they're missing, have blind spots there. I like to develop these capacities through their relationship with me. If I find a child who really can't be close or doesn't want to be connected to other people or struggles with issues of loneliness, I want to say, well, what's it like you're being pretty honest with me? You've been meeting with me with coffee. What's this like? In other words, try on an experience of an intimate relationship. How's it going so far? And it starts to build a category for them. I want to have a kid who has, like a chameleon kid, who does what everybody tells them and doesn't have any control over their life. I want to say, you know, you can't say no to anybody and your life is running crazy. I tell you what I want you to do. Next time I ask you to go get coffee and it's inconvenient for you, I want you to say no to me. I'm your guinea pig. Say no to me. I want you to practice and see what happens. Can you be you? Can you let me down and know that I still got your back? In other words, I want to push these kids in these boundaries. I want to say, you feel so much shame about telling me that secret you just told me. Do I look any different? Am I relating to you any different? Has shame taken away our relationship? Something in you thinks shame is going to ruin everything. Look what's happening here. I'm your pal. We're cool. I'm as bad as you are. In other words, we build these capacities through the interactions with other people. That's where one-on-one really starts to get some meat on the bones. And you start to give with someone through your relationship with them. All right. next year or something, we can unpack this even more. Have me back again. But I want to save some time for questions and some time for looking at some particular issues that you want to talk about. We've talked a lot about porn. We can talk about eating disorders or depression or anxiety or whatever. Yes, Brad.
What do you do when you're feeling, nice. I got to think about my question a little bit. When you kind of ask somebody, everybody's got something that is out of control in their life.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at you and, well, what's yours? And so maybe they aren't feeling safe. I don't know what might be going on there, but they where it feels like they want to know, they don't want to share their personal stuff until you share, well, what's out of control for you? Dr. Phil, not that they would say it that way, but yeah, that's the question. And it feels like a boundary violation.
What's y'all's emotional gut when you hear that question?
Feels like a bid.
A bid. What else?
I'd share what I can share, because I want to build trust.
No, answer my question first. What's your emotional gut to that question? Listen to your gut.
Try to change the subject.
Change the subject? Huh? Yeah, exactly. There's a little hostility to it. Like, really? You first, okay? I would take my time and answer it, and I would say, that is such an interesting way for you to approach this. I think that as our relationship develops, I would be comfortable talking to you about some of my own struggles. I think what I'm most interested in right now is what it would give you if I told you. So I said, heck, I like to, a meth lab in the basement, just for the weekends. And you found out that, what would that give you? That's the issue. Okay? Basically, they're talking about their shame. Good one. Yes, sir.
Going back to when your kids were in youth group, how would you have wanted the youth pastor to approach you with issues they perceive with you and your parenting of the kids that is affecting the kids' behaviors that you're dealing with?
As an advocate for me. In other words, you have an insight into my child's life that I don't have. And if you see something going on, I want you to bring it to me in a non-judgmental way. I want you to bring it to me in an information way. I want you to bring it to me, at least first go round, in a non-therefore way, in a way that doesn't require I do anything. More of a heads up way, I got your back. I want you to say, one of the things that I want to do as your youth ministers, minister your kids, is I just have a perspective on them, and I just kind of want to let you see some of what we're seeing. And one of the things I've noticed is that little Johnny seems to keep to himself a whole lot with the group. And I don't know if that means anything or if that is a concern, but I want you to know that I'm aware of it. Is there anything that you would like me to know or any way I can minister to him in those ways? It's just one of the things I'm looking out for. And I would approach it in very much a collegial way, not an accountability way. Like, we're having a real problem and we need y'all to sort of look at this. I would try approaching it like that first. I'm wondering if behind your question is also an issue of what you do with resistant defensive parents.
Definitely, and assuming you've done steps 1 to 2 to 3 to 4,
right,
the other side, and you've reached a point where there's nothing more you can really do for the student except continue hugging them until they graduate and get out of the house.
You got it.
At what point, and assuming you have a session support, you've gone through Presbyterian polity, and it's still on your shoulders to say something to the parents, how and what can you say, or should you just go, dear God, help this family?
Well, if it's gone through that many steps, it's not still on your shoulders to deal with the parents if you're a Presbyterian. I'd call in, a big beefy elder with a chainsaw. It's like... It's time to call in some reinforcements. If it's an issue that has that much of a crisis component and that much gravity that has to be addressed, if there's that much nastiness going on, I really would want session intervention. Pull in the reinforcements. Do the sort of Matthew 18, and that, bring a friend, bring a witness, bring the elders. It's sort of like, the hierarchy. But I do think that the other piece you named, some parents will never change, and some parents don't want to change, and sometimes you got to do a little shake the dust off your feet. But that role that you can play as a third party in children's lives, do not underestimate it. I have a client now who is 60. And he grew up in this family that was just whacked out, like destructive, awful family. Love did not have a place. It was full of competition and danger and turning on each other, betrayal. And he didn't have a category for love. And he dealt with all this depression and difficult symptoms. And I was kind of at a loss, because how am I going to teach somebody about love and groundedness and safety and all that if they don't have any reference point for it? But there was this piano teacher. And it's like one day he started talking about this piano teacher, and this piano teacher loved him. This piano teacher loved him. And it was like that was this index that changed his life. It was what we hooked onto to do his work, and it just was the seed that everything else came from. So even if you have, you're dealing with a kid who has, the worst parents in the universe, and they don't care about him or care about you or care about church, if you can continue giving to this kid, what you're doing is you are creating these categories for them from somewhere. We don't need a dad, we need fathering. We don't need a mom, we need mothering. And that can come from our family of origin, it can come from our second family, the body of Christ. Y'all can do that so much. I really think that the body of Christ as an entity for growth is essential for our sanctification. We have to have that. And our culture's lost that. The Industrial Revolution, whatever, we don't live in that community anymore. Like, think about, you read the Puritans, and they're saying stuff like, Brother Bartholomew was taken with a grave melancholia, and so we, visited him after church services and regaled him with spiritual hymns and songs. And Brother Bartholomew's not going to be depressed very long, if I was depressed and y'all came over and stood around my bed and sang me songs and stuff, after church, I'd feel better. I don't need Prozac, Y'all love me. Instead, in our culture, it's like, I don't want anybody to know I'm going to therapy, I don't want anybody to know I'm hurting. But you have a community in which people know and people love, then I'm out of a job. I can start a restaurant. Anyway, that theme is what y'all are doing. And all we're saying, all counseling is, all one-on-one is a strategic form of fellowship. We're looking at how to bring the means of grace, be it love one another or confront one another or tell the truth or confess or, forgive or be humble or be steadfast or bend the knee. You can just plug in Paul to these categories. What we're doing is we're applying those categories in a one-on-one way in fellowship. That's all this is. Yes? I guess this needs to be last question. I'm willing to stay a little bit longer if some of y'all want to leave and some of you want to stay and do some more questions with permission. I bend the knee. Okay.
This may be a little bit off field from this, but when you said, coming at it practically rather than morally,
yeah,
and the Bible talks about life and death, that made a lot of sense in terms of our pastoral role in ministry and intervention. In a situation like we are today, culture wars, kind of reactivity to the postmodern, no truth, and we have a absolutist kind of reactivity to that. If you say that into the church, I want practical over morals, people might hear, I guess what I'm asking is, how do I address this, or how does anyone address this to the church in a way that you begin to, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I wouldn't tell anybody this unless you were doing small group training for leaders.
Okay.
In other words, what we're talking about here is not, John, tell us the way we should frame the context of the delivery of truth within the church. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, how do I get truth that is life-giving into someone's deep heart? Now, I can tell someone truth all day long, And telling them truth is great. Truth is still truth. But the question is not, is it true? The question is, will they take it into their soul? And if it's scary or moral or create shame for them, they will run. So the trick is, how do we wrap it in sugar to where they can get it? Now, if you want to ask me what's the role of truth, then I think you should stand in the pulpit and say, this is God's word, and this is the absolute truth. We can talk about it, we can think about it, but we didn't make it up, and we are beneath it. I mean, if you want to talk about truth, yes, that. If you want to talk about how to get into people's guts, that's what we're talking about.
Is that on? There we go.